What if a government could flip a switch and make 6 million people disappear from the digital world? In November 2020, while the rest of the planet was connected through the global crisis of a pandemic, a vast region in northern Ethiopia was quietly severed. No dial tones, no internet pings, no banking transactions. In an era where we can track a food delivery in real time, the Ethiopian state created a black hole of information so absolute that it effectively moved the Tigray region out of the 21st century and into a dark age of total, state-sanctioned silence. They told the world it was a law enforcement operation. They said it would be over in weeks. But as the fiber optic cables were cut and the cell towers went cold, the silence was not an accident of war. It was a mechanical necessity for what was about to happen next. Most of us saw the glossy 4K drone shots of the Simeon Mountains on our Instagram feeds, unaware that just over the ridge, a population was being starved, hunted, and systematically erased from the human record. This was the first time in modern history that a state utilized its total monopoly over telecommunications to hide a massacre of this scale. It wasn't just a military campaign. It was a documented attempt to see if a government could murder in the dark and get away with it because no one could upload the evidence. We are looking at a geopolitical fortress where the truth is not just hidden, it is liquidated. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. I want to know exactly how far these hidden stories are reaching. Axum is not supposed to be a place of blood. To the Ethiopian Orthodox faithful, this is the final resting place of the Ark of the Covenant, a city so sacred that its very air is treated as a relic. But in late November 2020, the sanctity of Axum was replaced by the cold, mechanical sound of heavy artillery and the rhythmic boots of the Ethiopian National Defense Force and their Eritrean allies. While the government in Addis Ababa was issuing press releases about a bloodless entry into the city, the residents were witnessing something that the state's official archives will never acknowledge. The investigation into Axum reveals a terrifying blueprint for modern erasure. Eyewitness accounts, smuggled out months after the fact, describe a city turned into a hunting ground. In the streets surrounding the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, civilians were not caught in the crossfire, they were the targets. Reports indicate that hundreds of young men were pulled from their homes, lined up against the ancient stone walls that have stood for millennia, and executed. But it was the methodical nature of the cleanup that proves the intent. Under the cover of the total communication blackout, the perpetrators didn't just kill, they managed the evidence. They forbade the burial of the dead. For days, the bodies of Axum's sons were left to rot in the sun, a psychological weapon used to break the spirit of the survivors. In a city built on the memory of the past, the state was attempting to ensure that there would be no one left to tell the story of the present. The silence of Axum wasn't a lack of noise. It was the suffocating weight of a truth that was being buried faster than the victims. And how does a man go from the world's highest honor for peace to being the architect of Africa's deadliest 21st century conflict in less than 2 years? This is the central paradox of Abiy Ahmed. In 2019, the Nobel Committee celebrated him for his efforts to achieve peace and international cooperation. By 2021, that same peace was being used as a shield to deflect international scrutiny from what many legal experts now classify as ethnic cleansing. We must investigate the Metamer philosophy, the state's official ideology of synergy and unity. On the surface, it sounded like a progressive step toward a modern, unified Ethiopia. But as our investigation deepens, we find that unity was often used as a synonym for total subservience. The Nobel Prize didn't just validate a leader, it provided a cloak of international legitimacy that allowed the administration to dismantle its rivals under the guise of national security. The machinery of the state didn't change with the award, it simply upgraded. The surveillance tactics used by the previous Marxist military junta, the Derg, were not discarded. They were digitized. This wasn't a transition to democracy. It was the evolution of an empire. We are looking at a state that learned how to speak the language of the West, using terms like reform, sovereignty, and law enforcement, to perform the most brutal acts of centralized power, while the international community sat in a state of confused hesitation, paralyzed by the image of the peacemaker they had helped create. If you feel a sense of confusion or disbelief reading these accounts, that is because you have been the victim of a global campaign of state-sponsored gaslighting. This is what we call epistemic injustice, the deliberate withholding of the tools and information you need to understand reality. The Ethiopian government spent millions on lobbying firms and social media bots to ensure that when you thought of Ethiopia, you thought of economic growth and ancient history, not the mass graves of Humera or the weaponized starvation of Tigray. The unseen Ethiopia is not a mystery because the facts are hard to find. It is a mystery because a coordinated effort was made to ensure you never look for them. They counted on your fatigue. They counted on the Western media's preference for simple African success stories over the complex, bloody reality of a fracturing empire. They used the 4K sunrises of the Simeon Mountains to blind you to the smoke rising from the burning villages of the Amhara heartland. This investigation is the corrective. We are walking away from the tourism brochures and the government press releases. We are stepping into the black hole of information to piece together a story that was never meant to reach your screen. The world was told the war was over, that the humanitarian truce had solved the crisis, and that Ethiopia was back on the path to prosperity. But as we will uncover layer by layer, that narrative is a fabrication. The war didn't end. It simply evolved, moved its borders, and refined its methods. The world was told the war was over. The silence was actually a shroud. In November 2020, the Ethiopian state achieved something that should be impossible in our interconnected age. With the pull of a few circuit breakers and the encryption of a few servers, 6 million people were deleted from the global consciousness. This was not a side effect of military movement. It was a deliberate mechanical severing of reality. When the fiber optic lines were cut, it didn't just stop people from posting to social media, it stopped the world from seeing a war. By controlling the state-owned telecommunications monopoly, the administration in Addis Ababa created a laboratory of silence. In this vacuum, the government could dictate the only existing narrative. For those inside the blackout zone, the psychological impact was immediate and total. Imagine waking up in a world where your phone is a paperweight, where your bank card is plastic scrap, and the only news you hear is the low rumble of artillery in the distance. You are no longer a citizen of the 21st century. You are a ghost in a machine that has been turned off by the very people sworn to protect you. This was the opening move of a strategy designed to ensure that by the time the world found out what was happening, there would be nothing left to save. The official records call it a humanitarian truce, but the evidence suggests a much more calculated tactical objective. In the geography of war, a siege is usually defined by walls and trenches, but in northern Ethiopia, the walls were made of bureaucracy and red tape. By controlling the limited entry points into the Tigray region, the federal government turned life-saving aid into a political bargaining chip. Every truck of grain and every crate of medicine had to pass through a gauntlet of state-controlled checkpoints where security concerns were used as a pretext for months of delay. While international agencies pleaded for access, thousands of tons of food sat rotting in warehouses just miles from a starving population. This was weaponized starvation disguised as administrative caution. The goal was simple: to break the will of a people by making their survival entirely dependent on the mercy of their primary adversary. By restricting fuel, the state ensured that even if food reached the regional capital, it could never be distributed to the rural villages where the hunger was most acute. This was not a lapse in logistics. It was the perfection of a siege that required no soldiers on the perimeter, and only a pen and a clipboard in a government office. To destroy a society, you do not just take their food, you take their ability to participate in the world. The economic liquidation of northern Ethiopia was a silent execution. When the banking servers were deactivated, the private wealth of an entire ethnic group was effectively confiscated. Teachers, doctors, and shopkeepers who had spent decades building modest savings found themselves penniless overnight. This was a methodical strike against the middle class, designed to ensure that no internal resistance could be funded and no local economy could sustain itself. Without access to currency, the basic fabric of human interaction dissolved. Many people were forced back into a primitive barter system, while the state-controlled media broadcasted images of a booming national economy in the capital. This economic blockade served a dual purpose. It paralyzed the local administration and forced the civilian population into a state of total, desperate focus on the next meal. It is a documented attempt to use poverty as a pacification tool. The human cost of this financial freeze is found in the stories of families who watched their children die of easily treatable illnesses because they couldn't withdraw the equivalent of $20 to pay for a ride to the nearest functioning clinic. Inside the blackout, the most profound acts of resilience occurred in the dark. In the hospitals of Mekelle, medical professionals were forced to redefine the limits of their oath. Tonight, with no electricity and a total blockade on medical supplies, the regional referral centers became sites of primitive struggle. Surgeons performed complex abdominal procedures using the glow of a few handheld flashlights, their hands moving with the precision of experts even as their equipment failed. They were washing and reusing single-use bandages and operating with rusted tools that should have been decommissioned years prior. While this was happening, the official government channels were distributing high-definition footage of new luxury parks and shiny transit projects in Addis Ababa. The contrast is not just a matter of political irony. It is evidence of a state that had completely decoupled its branding from its reality. For the doctors in Tigray, so every successful surgery was a quiet act of rebellion against a state that had decided their patients were no longer worthy of life. They were fighting a war against infection and trauma with nothing but their skill and the dim light of a dying battery. While the rest of the world remained blinded by the digital shroud the government had so effectively deployed. The 2019 Nobel Peace Prize was not the beginning of a new era for Ethiopia, but the construction of a geopolitical shield. When the committee in Oslo draped the medal around the neck of a former intelligence officer, they provided him with a level of international immunity that few leaders ever achieve. This prestige was immediately converted into political capital. It allowed the administration to settle a long-standing border dispute with Eritrea, not as a genuine humanitarian gesture, but as a strategic alignment between two military powers. By securing the northern flank, the groundwork was laid for a domestic crackdown that would have been unthinkable for a leader without such a high-profile endorsement. The world wanted to believe in a new African success story so badly that they ignored the warning signs of escalating rhetoric and the quiet sidelining of Federalist opponents. The Nobel Prize functioned as a distraction, a bright light that blinded international observers to the fact that the machinery of the state was being sharpened for internal use. While global leaders were busy praising the reformer was busy consolidating the very military and intelligence structures he had promised to dismantle. This was the ultimate mask of legitimacy. It used to hide the intent of a state that was preparing to wage war on its own citizens, under the guise of maintaining a peace the world had already validated. The state's official philosophy of metamer, or synergy, was marketed as a grand project of national healing. It was presented as a way to stitch together a fractured empire through a shared vision of prosperity. However, an investigation into its application reveals a much more coercive reality. In practice, this philosophy functioned as a mandatory ideological framework where unity became a tool for the erasure of regional autonomy. The administration used this concept to justify the dismantling of the ethnic federalist system that had defined Ethiopian politics for 30 years. To the centralized government, any insistence on regional rights or ethnic identity was characterized as division or extremism. This ideological shift turned the state into the sole arbiter of truth and identity. Those who resisted the synergy were not just political opponents. They were branded as enemies of the national spirit. The human consequence of this enforced unity was the rapid polarization of the country. By demanding total subservience to a single centralized vision, the government effectively told millions of people that their local history and their ancestral rights were secondary to the survival of the imperial center. Synergy was the velvet glove covering the iron fist of a state that no longer tolerated the complexity of its own people. To understand the current administration's methods, and we have to look at the blueprint of the Derg, the Marxist military junta that ruled Ethiopia through a decade of terror in the 1970s and 80s. While the ideology has changed, the structural DNA remains identical. The current government did not invent its system of neighborhood surveillance. It simply inherited it. The cabell system, a network of local administrative units originally designed to monitor every household for revolutionary purity, remains the primary tool for state control. In the modern era, these units have been revitalized to track the movements and political leanings of every citizen. This is the invisible machinery of the state, a system that turns neighbors into informants and transforms the local community into a site of permanent observation. The transition from the old military junta to the current administration was not a break from the past, but a refinement of it. The tactics of the Red Terror, extrajudicial detentions, ideological re-education, and the public shaming of dissenters have been polished and integrated into a modern legal framework. This is a state that understands that true power does not come from the ballot box, but from the ability to maintain a presence in every living room and on every street corner. The most dangerous evolution of this inherited system is the transition into a biometric panopticon. The government has moved beyond the manual surveillance of the past and into the realm of high-tech repression. Utilizing foreign technology and sophisticated digital tracking, the administration has begun mapping the social and ethnic networks of its population with terrifying precision. Facial recognition cameras and biometric identification cards are no longer just tools for efficiency. They are the eyes of a state that predicts dissent before it can be voiced. This digital monitoring system feeds directly into a network of undeclared detention facilities, the most notorious of which is the federal center known as the White House. This is a location where the digital world and the physical world collide in the most brutal way. It is a facility designed for the neutralization of influential voices, where activists and journalists are held without charge and subjected to psychological pressure. The biometric panopticon ensures that there is no such thing as a private thought or a secret meeting. By controlling the digital infrastructure, the state has created a reality where your very existence is a data point that can be deleted at the push of a button. This is the final layer of the paradox. A leader celebrated for opening the country has used that very openness to build a cage that is invisible until you try to leave it. In the brutal geography of the northern Ethiopia conflict, the front lines were not limited to mountain passes or regional capitals. The most devastating battles were fought on a biological level. As the investigation into the 2020 to 2022 war deepens, a terrifying pattern emerges where the female body was transformed into a deliberate site of ethnic liquidation. This was not the accidental cruelty of undisciplined soldiers. It was a systematic campaign of sexual violence used as a strategic tool of war. Survivors and medical witnesses describe a reality where the objective was to break the genetic continuity of an entire people. By targeting women, the invading forces were attempting to strike at the very source of future generations. This was the biological extension of the territorial siege, an effort to ensure that even if the land was eventually returned, the people who inhabited it would be permanently broken. The trauma was designed to be inherited, a psychological scar etched into the collective memory of the Tigrayan population. This is the darkest layer of the conflict, where the state and its allies move beyond political suppression and into the realm of organized biological erasure. The evidence of this campaign is found in the chilling consistency of the medical reports smuggled out of the region. Doctors who treated survivors documented a specific, horrific protocol of destruction that proves the intent to end reproductive health. These were not random acts of violence, but methodical procedures where foreign objects, ranging from heated plastic to metal shards and stones, were forced into reproductive organs. The goal was clearly stated by the perpetrators in many documented cases, to ensure these women would never be able to bear children again. This is the definition of a reproductive war. By destroying the fertility of thousands of women, the forces aligned against the Tigrayan people were attempting to execute a long-term demographic shift through trauma and physical mutilation. This level of coordination suggests a shared understanding among the military ranks that the goal was the permanent removal of an ethnic identity from the future of the nation. These documented acts constitute a direct challenge to the official government narrative that characterized the war as a simple law enforcement operation. This was a calculated liquidation of a people's future. For those who survived the initial onslaught, the nightmare continued within the displacement camps and the ruins of rural villages. The silence that surrounds these survivors is not a lack of testimony, but the weight of a trauma that defies language. In these camps, the psychological warfare continued as women were forced to live in close proximity to the very forces that had brutalized them. And the human consequence of this reproductive war is a generation of women who have been alienated from their own bodies and their own communities. The social fabric of Tigrayan society, which places deep value on family and lineage, was the primary target of this psychological strike. By creating a class of survivors who carry the physical and emotional markers of this erasure, the perpetrators ensured that the war would continue in the minds of the victims for decades. The shame and isolation intended by the attackers were used to fracture the solidarity of the people. Yet in the quiet corners of these camps, the act of speaking is the final form of resistance. Each testimony is a crack in the wall of silence that the state worked so hard to maintain through its communication blackouts and digital erasures. And the documentation of these atrocities by international monitors provides a baseline of evidence that the Ethiopian state has spent years trying to discredit. Reports from organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have detailed the scale of the violence. Yet the administration in Addis Ababa continues to categorize these war crimes as isolated incidents or fabrications of the internal enemy. This persistent denial is a crucial component of the state's strategy. If the crimes are never acknowledged, the survivors can never achieve justice, and the official history remains unblemished. The investigation reveals a massive gap between the documented reality on the ground and the sanitized version of events presented to the global community. This is not just a matter of conflicting reports. It is a battle for the truth of what it means to survive an empire's attempt at erasure. The human consequence is a landscape where justice is delayed by geopolitical interests, leaving a population to carry the unresolved weight of a war that was never supposed to be seen. The reproductive war was the ultimate expression of the state's hunger for absolute control, a hunger that did not stop at the borders of the land, but attempted to colonize the very possibility of a future. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is marketed as a beacon of African self-reliance, but its true function is far more aggressive. This massive concrete barrier across the Blue Nile is not merely a power plant, it is a strategic mechanism for regional dominance, By constructing this project, the Ethiopian state has seized control over the primary artery of the Nile, effectively granting Addis Ababa the power to dictate the survival of nations downstream. This is hydropolitics as a form of total war. The dam represents a unilateral assertion of authority over an international resource, transforming a shared river into a national asset. The ability to regulate the flow of the Nile is the ability to influence the stability of the entire Horn of Africa. For decades, the river was governed by treaties and historical usage. But the completion of this project has rendered those agreements obsolete. The state has moved from being a participant in a regional ecosystem to being the master of it. This isn't just about bringing electricity to the millions. It is about the power to flip a switch that can cause drought or flood in Cairo and Khartoum at the whim of a single government. Behind the celebrated engineering of the dam lies a secret history of state-sanctioned removal. To clear the way for the massive reservoir, the Ethiopian government orchestrated the forced displacement of the indigenous Gumuz people. This community, which has inhabited the banks of the Blue Nile for centuries, was deemed a logistical obstacle to national progress. Their ancestral lands, their sacred sites, and their traditional ways of life were erased to make room for 74 billion cubic meters of water. This was not a voluntary relocation. It was a methodical uprooting. The state utilized its security forces to ensure the clearing of the Benishangul Gumuz region, moving thousands of people into militarized resettlement villages where their connection to the land was severed. The government's branding of the project as a people's dam is a direct contradiction to the reality of those whose homes now sit under hundreds of feet of water. The Gumuz were not invited to participate in the prosperity the project promised. They were simply removed from the map. This displacement was the necessary human cost for the state to achieve its goal of energy independence and regional leverage. The rising waters of the reservoir did more than just store energy. They functioned as a tool of environmental and historical erasure. As the basin filled, it submerged evidence of local resistance and the very physical memory of the communities that once lived there. Satellite imagery reveals that vast tracts of forest, essential for local biodiversity and indigenous medicine, were flooded without any environmental mitigation or compensation for the displaced. The Benishangul Gumuz region has since been transformed into a militarized zone, where the state's security presence is used to suppress any lingering dissent from those who lost everything to the project. The filling process was conducted with a level of secrecy that mirrors the communication blackouts in the north. By unilaterally deciding when and how to fill the reservoir, the government ensured that any internal or external opposition was presented with a finished reality that could not be reversed. The silence of the reservoir is the silence of a buried history, where the state's hunger for modern infrastructure has physically drowned the legitimate claims of its own citizens. Well, the true existential risk of the project is the creation of a hydropolitical kill switch. For the nations of Egypt and Sudan, the Nile is not just a river, it is their only source of life. By controlling the flow, Ethiopia has introduced a systemic vulnerability into the lives of over 100 million people downstream. This is water security transformed into a weapon of high-stakes diplomacy. In a period of regional tension, the management of the dam's outflow can be used to exert pressure on neighboring governments, turning the basic necessity of water into a tool of coercion. The human consequence is a generation of farmers along the Nile who now exist in a state of permanent uncertainty, their livelihoods dependent on decisions made in a distant capital with which their governments are often at odds. What the investigation reveals that the project has pushed the entire Horn of Africa to the precipice of a regional water war. This monument to engineering is, in reality, a monument to the state's willingness to gamble with the survival of an entire region to secure its own position as the dominant power in East Africa. The 74 billion cubic meters of water held behind the concrete walls of the reservoir represent more than just a pool of potential energy. This is a geography of coercion. To understand the scale of this trigger, one must look at the agricultural heartlands of the Lower Nile. In a world where climate patterns are increasingly volatile, the ability to store a volume of water equal to the entire annual flow of the river is a staggering concentration of power. This is not a passive structure. It is an active threat against the agricultural sovereignty of North Africa. The Ethiopian state now possesses the mechanical means to induce a man-made drought by simply slowing the release of the Blue Nile. By asserting that the river is a national resource rather than a shared heritage, the administration has turned every drop of water into a unit of political leverage. This is a reality where a central government can use the environment to perform a slow-motion strangulation of its neighbors. The volume is the message. The survival of the downstream states is now a matter of Ethiopian domestic policy. The region surrounding the dam, known as Benishangul Gumuz, has been transformed into a shadow war zone that remains invisible to the global community. While the state-run media broadcasts images of technical triumph, the reality on the ground is one of militarized suppression. The federal security forces have established a permanent and heavy presence here, ostensibly to protect the infrastructure from foreign sabotage. However, our investigation reveals that this security apparatus is frequently used to manage the internal enemies within the local population. Ethnic violence in this borderland has intensified as the state uses the project to justify the displacement of minority groups who are seen as a threat to the stability of the dam. The Amhara and Oromo minorities living in the region have become targets in a cycle of insurgent activity and state retaliation. This is a landscape where the state's hunger for energy has sparked a bloody insurgency that is systematically ignored by an international press focused on the engineering narrative. The dam sits at the center of a militarized circle where the price of electricity is paid in the currency of ethnic targeting and forced resettlement. For the millions of Sudanese and Egyptian farmers who depend on the Nile, the dam has introduced a form of downstream ransom. This is the psychological consequence of the water switch. Imagine a generation of producers who wake up every day not knowing if their irrigation channels will be full or if the source of their life will be cut off by a decision made in a distant, often hostile capital. This isn't just about the physical availability of water, it's about the total loss of predictability. In the Nile Delta, where the margins of survival are already thin, this uncertainty is an economic death sentence. When the Ethiopian government unilaterally decides to fill the reservoir during a dry season, it effectively places a ransom on the stability of North Africa. The pressure is felt in every market and every village, from Khartoum to the Mediterranean. This is the human anchor of the hydropolitical weapon, the power to decide who lives and who dies by thirst. The state has created a systemic vulnerability that forces its neighbors to choose between total submission to Addis Ababa or the risk of a regional famine. The investigation into the management of the Blue Nile reveals a total monopoly of life. The Ethiopian administration has consistently rejected binding international oversight or shared management protocols that would ensure the safety of downstream nations. Much of this refusal is the ultimate proof that the dam was built as an instrument of regional leverage. By maintaining total, unilateral control over the flow, the state ensures that the river remains a weapon rather than a resource. This is a rejection of the centuries-old understanding of transboundary water rights in favor of a 19th century imperial model. The state argues for equitable use, but the evidence suggests a desire for absolute dominance. The human consequence is the transformation of a natural lifeline into a man-made border. The people along the banks of the Nile are now divided, not just by nationality, but by their proximity to the hand that controls the valve. This is the deepest truth of the project. The Blue Nile is no longer a river. It is a classified instrument of state power, and its flow is the most valuable commodity in the Horn of Africa. The deployment of deep packet inspection technology has allowed the Ethiopian state to build a virtual fence around the private lives of its citizens. This is not merely about blocking websites or slowing down the internet. It is a granular, invasive monitoring of the very data packets that carry private conversations. By utilizing sophisticated foreign technology, the government can now intercept and read communications on encrypted platforms that were once thought to be secure. During the height of the northern Ethiopia conflict, this virtual fence was tightened to identify and isolate anyone who deviated from the official military narrative. The state has moved beyond the simple censorship of the past into a realm of total information awareness. And this technology allows the security apparatus to listen to the digital heartbeat of the nation, identifying keywords, sentiments, and social connections in real time. For the individual in Addis Ababa or Mekelle, this means that every message sent to a family member or a colleague is a potential piece of evidence. The virtual fence ensures that the state is an uninvited participant in every digital interaction, creating a psychological environment where people have learned to fear their own devices. The traditional neighborhood surveillance system has undergone a radical transformation into what we can call the binary cabell. For decades, the cabell was a physical office in every district where local administrators kept paper files on the political leanings of their neighbors. Today, those dusty ledgers have been replaced by a centralized biometric database. This is a digital mapping of the entire population, where ethnic background, social networks, and historical movements are cross-referenced with a single identification number. The state has digitized the eyes of the neighborhood, allowing the Central Security Agency to track individuals with a level of precision the old Marxist junta could only dream of. This system is designed to identify patterns of unreliability within specific ethnic groups. If you are a Tigrayan living in the capital, your binary file is flagged not for what you have done, but for who you are and who you know. This is the modernization of the surveillance state, a system that uses the efficiency of the 21st century to enforce the ethnic profiling of the 19th. The human consequence is a society where the government knows your history better than you do and uses that data to decide your level of freedom. The 2020 Hate Speech and Disinformation Proclamation is not a law designed to protect the public, but a structural tool for the legalization of disappearance. Under the guise of preventing ethnic tension, the state has granted itself a legal blank check to criminalize any reporting that contradicts the official military or economic narrative. This proclamation is the primary weapon used against the independent press. In practice, it means that a journalist who documents a drone strike on a civilian target or a village suffering from man-made hunger can be charged with spreading disinformation. The law is intentionally vague, it allowing the judiciary to interpret any act of dissent as a threat to national security. This has led to the systematic detention of dozens of media workers, many of whom are held in undisclosed locations for weeks without access to legal counsel. The state has successfully turned the legal system into a meat grinder for the truth. By labeling investigative findings as hate speech, the administration ensures that the only permitted reality is the one curated by the state-run media. This is the legal machinery that allows the government to maintain its digital panopticon while claiming to uphold the rule of law. The ultimate objective of this digital machinery is the execution of the predictive purge. The state no longer waits for a protest to happen or an article to be published, and it uses its surveillance data to preemptively neutralize individuals who show the potential for leadership or dissent. By mapping the social networks of activists and journalists, the security forces can identify the nodes of a movement and remove them before they can mobilize. This is a form of algorithmic repression, In the early months of 2026, this predictive model has been utilized to conduct targeted arrests across the Amhara and Oromo regions, focusing on those whose digital footprints suggest a growing dissatisfaction with the central administration. The predictive purge creates a landscape of quiet terror where people disappear not for what they said, but for what the state's software thinks they might say next. The human consequence is the total decapitation of civil society. When the state can predict your resistance, the very idea of a public square or a free gathering becomes an impossibility. This is the final validation of the digital panopticon, a system that has made the state's control so absolute that it no longer needs to win the argument. It simply deletes the opposition. The rapid expansion of the glass and steel skyline in Addis Ababa is not a sign of widespread national prosperity, but the architecture of a mask. The Ethiopian state has spent billions of dollars on high-end parks, luxury transit hubs, and glitzy commercial centers to create a sense of inevitable progress. This is the construction of a Potemkin village on a continental scale. For the international investor or the visiting diplomat, the city offers a vision of a rising Africa, a stable center of a modernizing economy. But this aesthetic barrier is designed to hide the fact that the periphery of the country is burning. While these towers rise, the inflation rate has obliterated the purchasing power of the rural poor, and the state's resources are being diverted from famine relief to fund the vanity projects of the central elite. The glass reflects the sun, but it also blinds the world to the smoke from villages only a few hundred miles away. The city is being built as a stage where the government can perform the role of a modern administration, while its survival actually depends on the brutal suppression of the very regions that provide the capital with its resources. Sitting in the shadow of this new urban grandeur is a location the state never mentions in its tourism brochures: the federal detention facility known as the White House. This is the dark engine at the heart of the rebrand. While the government invites the world to walk through its new botanical gardens, it is simultaneously funneling hundreds of activists, journalists, and suspected dissenters into this notorious warehouse of the state. The White House represents the physical reality of the administration's survival strategy. It is here that the facade of the modern metropolis is stripped away, and the raw power of the security apparatus is laid bare. The proximity of such a site to the luxury hotels and international headquarters is a calculated statement. It tells the population that the new city is not for everyone. It is a space reserved for those who remain silent about the fracturing empire. The investigation into this facility reveals a system of indefinite detention and psychological pressure that is essential for maintaining the urban illusion. The city can only look this clean and this stable because the messier elements of democracy and dissent have been physically removed and locked away behind these nondescript federal walls. The human cost of this urban stability is found in the midnight eviction of those branded as the internal enemy. In the residential districts of the capital, the state has orchestrated a quiet but systematic removal of ethnic Tigrayans and, more recently, Amhara citizens. These are people who have called Addis Ababa home for generations, yet they are being pulled from their beds and taken to remote military camps or repurposed warehouses on the outskirts of the city. This is the ethnically targeted unmixing of the capital. The goal is to maintain an artificial ethnic purity within the center of power, ensuring that no potential resistance can form within reach of the government ministries. The psychological toll on the city's population is immense. Neighbors watch in silence as families disappear, knowing that a single social media post or an unlucky connection could make them the next target. This isn't just a political crackdown, it is the total destruction of the urban social fabric. The state is making it clear that citizenship is conditional, based solely on the administrative boundary of your birth, rather than your contribution to the city. The growing towers are financed by a state that is actively hollowing out the very people who build them. In this environment, the truth has become a commodity that only the state can afford to produce. By controlling the digital infrastructure and the physical landscape, the administration has achieved a total monopoly on the urban narrative. The rapid construction of skyscrapers and the constant stream of state-sanctioned media have created a reality where the only history that exists is the one currently being broadcast. This is the total commodification of truth. For the residents of the capital, the disconnection between what they see in their streets and what they know is happening in the mountains is a source of permanent psychological tension. The government has turned the city into a screen, projecting an image of stability that is entirely untethered from the reality of the internal refugees and the drone strikes occurring in the heartlands. By ensuring that the internet remains a privilege that can be withdrawn at any moment, the state ensures that the only permitted reality is the 4K version of Ethiopia it exports to the world. The investigation reveals that Addis Ababa is no longer a city in the traditional sense. It is a controlled environment designed to prove the government's success, even as the nation it claims to lead dissolves into a patchwork of autonomous war zones. The creation of the ghost zones in the Oromo region is a deliberate administrative act of abandonment. These are areas where the federal government has effectively conceded the physical landscape to the insurgency, retreating its civil officials and police into heavily fortified garrison towns. Outside these militarized pockets, the map of the country dissolves into a lawless shadow war. And in these zones, the infrastructure of the state, the schools, the courts, and the clinics, has been systematically dismantled, leaving millions of people to exist in a political vacuum. This is a cartography of exclusion. By designating these regions as active conflict theaters, the administration in Addis Ababa has granted its military forces a license to operate without oversight or legal constraint. The ghost zones are not merely a byproduct of fighting. They are a tactical requirement for a state that wants to conduct a counterinsurgency away from the eyes of the world. In these silent expanses, the boundary between the civilian and the insurgent is intentionally blurred by the state's security apparatus. The result is a landscape where memory is the only remaining record of the lives being lost. Whereas the official maps no longer reflect the reality of who controls the soil or who is buried within it. In a region where the internet has been permanently disabled as a matter of military policy, the truth has regained its physical weight. The digital world has been severed in the ghost zones for years, making the instant upload an impossibility. To counter this, a dangerous underground network has emerged, dedicated to the physical movement of data. This is the memory card underground. Our investigation has uncovered the methods used by activists and ordinary citizens to smuggle raw footage of atrocities across provincial lines and national borders. These thumb-sized pieces of plastic, hidden in the lining of clothing or the mechanical parts of motorcycles, carry the only existing evidence of what the state is doing in the dark. And this is the labor of an information war fought in the physical realm. The risks are absolute. To be caught with a memory card containing footage of an extrajudicial killing is a death sentence. By disabling the network, the state forced the resistance to become analog, but it failed to account for the human drive to bear witness. These cards contain the high-definition proof of a war that the government claims does not exist, proving that even a total digital blockade cannot stop the movement of a documented fact. The Oromo paradox is one of the most tragic layers of the modern Ethiopian state. When the current administration rose to power, it was carried on the shoulders of the Oromo youth movement, who believed they were finally dismantling a century of imperial exclusion, where they were promised a new era of representation and cultural liberation. Instead, they have become the primary tactical targets of the very government they helped install. The Oromo Liberation Army, once a distant insurgent group, has seen its ranks swell with young people who feel betrayed by the centralizing mission of the capital. This shift has turned the heartland of the country into a permanent battlefield. The human consequence is a generation of Oromo youth who are caught between the predatory recruitment of the insurgents and the indiscriminate brutality of the federal drone strikes. The state's reaction to this perceived betrayal has been a campaign of mass detentions and neighborhood-level surveillance that mirrors the worst periods of the previous junta. The people who were told they would finally own their destiny are now being policed as internal enemies within their own ancestral lands, proving that in the current empire, loyalty is a one-way street that leads only to the center. The data recovered from the memory card underground provides a devastating look at the human cost of the Shadow War. These smuggled testimonies contain accounts of extrajudicial killings and village burnings that the state's digital blockade was specifically designed to bury. We have seen footage of bound prisoners being executed in the brush of the Southern Highlands, away from any recognized combat zone. We have read the transcripts of survivors who describe military units moving through villages not to find rebels, but to punish the population for the crime of living in a ghost zone. And this is the raw reality of the state's counterinsurgency, a strategy of collective punishment intended to drain the sea so the fish cannot swim. These accounts reveal a level of organized liquidation that the official government reports refuse to acknowledge. The state counts on the world being too tired to look at these fragments of evidence, hoping that the lack of a cohesive, real-time media narrative will allow these crimes to fade into the historical ambiguity. But the memory cards remain. They are the physical remains of a truth that was supposed to be deleted, providing a voice to the victims whose lives were discarded in the pursuit of a centralized, synergy-driven empire. The political landscape of 2026 is defined by a betrayal that has set the Amhara heartland on fire. Only a few years ago, the Fano militia was the primary reason the central government did not collapse under the Northern Offensive. They were the irregular forces who stood in the breach when the federal army retreated. But the alliance was a marriage of convenience, not conviction. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, the administration in Addis Ababa moved to consolidate power by dismantling the very regional forces that had saved it. This decision ignited a resistance that is far more dangerous to the state than any previous insurgency. The Fano are not a distant rebel group. They are the local school teachers, farmers, and former soldiers who operate within the community's own veins. By attempting to disarm them, the state transformed its most loyal base into its most formidable enemy. The betrayal is felt in every village where the federal uniform, when once seen as a symbol of protection, is now viewed as an occupying force. This shift marks the total collapse of the political consensus that held the modern empire together, leaving the state with no tool but raw military might to maintain its influence in the most populous region of the country. The investigation into the events in Marawi reveals the terrifying new reality of the state's military protocol. In early 2024, after a clash with local militias, federal soldiers conducted a door-to-door execution of at least 50 civilians. This was not a response to active combat. It was a punitive strike designed to terrorize the local population into submission. Since then, the protocol has evolved into a frequent reliance on unmanned aerial vehicles to strike centers of resistance. The sky over the Amhara region is now occupied by drones that do not distinguish between a militia gathering and a town square. In Marawi and surrounding districts, these strikes have become the primary method of state communication. The use of aerial warfare against its own civilian infrastructure proves that the government has abandoned the pretense of law enforcement. Each drone strike is a confession of the state's inability to control the ground. The human cost is a landscape of permanent anxiety, where the sound of an engine overhead signifies a potential liquidation. By shifting to this remote, impersonal form of violence, the administration has created a mechanical distance between the decision makers in the capital and the blood on the streets of the heartland, ensuring that the war remains a matter of data points rather than human lives. The siege of Debre Berhan serves as a clinical study in the state's willingness to sacrifice its industrial and social hubs to maintain central authority. Once a growing center for investment and manufacturing, the city has been turned into a militarized cage. The federal army has established a perimeter of checkpoints that regulate the flow of food, fuel, and people, effectively holding the city's population hostage. This is the tactical encirclement of a domestic center. Inside the city, the atmosphere is one of stifled desperation. The industrial parks, which were supposed to be the engines of the new Ethiopian economy, are now warehouses for displaced people and military hardware. The human consequence of this siege is the total paralysis of a regional capital. Families who moved here for opportunity are now trapped in a cycle of house-to-house searches and arbitrary detentions. The state has turned Debre Berhan into a laboratory for urban control, testing how much pressure a metropolitan population can withstand before it breaks. This is no longer a war for the borders. It is a war for the survival of the central administration within the very cities it claims to have modernized. The current reality in the Amhara region represents the final fragmentation of the empire. The state has fundamentally lost the consent of the governed in its own heartland. When a government begins bombing its most populous regions and executing the very people who once defended its legitimacy, it has ceased to be a national authority and has become a survivalist regime. The federal army is now locked in a permanent, unwinnable war against its own base. This is a struggle that cannot be solved through more drones or more digital surveillance, because the resistance is rooted in a collective sense of existential survival. The fragmentation is not just political, it is psychological. The bond between the citizen and the state has been severed by the repeated application of extrajudicial force. The investigation into the Fano fire reveals a government that is burning its own house down to prevent anyone else from entering it. As the conflict deepens in 2026, the realization is settling in that the empire is no longer a cohesive entity, but a collection of fortified islands surrounded by a sea of popular resentment. Now, the fire in the heartland is the final validation that the state's strategy of total control has produced only total instability, leaving a nation to wonder what will remain when the smoke finally clears. The landlocked status of the Ethiopian state has become a structural choke point that threatens the very survival of the central administration. Since the loss of the coastline in the early 1990s, the nation's entire economic and military lifeblood has been filtered through a single expensive corridor in Djibouti. This geographical confinement is no longer just a matter of trade. It is a strategic prison. As internal conflicts in the Amhara, Oromo, and Tigray regions continue to drain the national treasury, the cost of port access has become an unsustainable burden. The investigation reveals that the pivot toward the sea is born not from a position of strength, but from a profound geography of desperation. The administration in Addis Ababa understands that without direct access to the global maritime routes, it cannot sustain the military hardware required to suppress its domestic insurgencies. This is the search for a pressure valve. By breaking the landlocked cycle, the state is attempting to bypass the regional isolation that has left it vulnerable to the fluctuating interests of its neighbors. The drive for the coast is a frantic effort to re-establish the state as a necessary player in the global economy, even as its internal infrastructure crumbles under the weight of permanent war. The Somaliland transaction represents a radical departure from decades of regional diplomacy. By signing a memorandum of understanding with a territory that lacks international recognition, the Ethiopian state has effectively bypassed the sovereign government in Mogadishu. This deal is a high-stakes exchange, diplomatic recognition for military and commercial access to a 20-kilometer strip of the Gulf of Aden. This is a transaction of necessity. For the administration, a naval base in the Red Sea is the ultimate prize, a way to project power far beyond its contested borders. However, the cost of this maritime outlet is the potential for a new, internationalized conflict. The move has already ignited a diplomatic firestorm, drawing the ire of Somalia and its regional allies. Inside the halls of power in Addis Ababa, this deal is framed as a historic reclamation of lost heritage. But the reality is a transactional gamble to secure a sovereign gateway that can be used to import the tools of state survival. The port is not being built for the people, it is being built for the security apparatus, ensuring that the flow of supplies into the imperial center is never again subject to the veto of a foreign power. The pivot to the sea is a calculated diversion intended to unify a fractured domestic population under a new banner of naval expansion. In a nation where the central authority is actively bombing its own heartlands and conducting extrajudicial purges, the promise of a coastline serves as a powerful nationalist distraction. The state-controlled media has pivoted from the grim reports of internal fighting to the glorious vision of a revived Ethiopian navy. This is the mobilization of a collective fantasy to mask the reality of internal disintegration. By focusing the national consciousness on a maritime horizon, the administration hopes to silence the growing demands for regional autonomy and justice. The investigation reveals that this maritime rhetoric is being used as an ideological glue, attempting to bridge the deep ethnic divides through a shared project of imperial reach. It is a classic strategy of externalizing ambition to mitigate internal collapse. For a population exhausted by years of blackout and siege, the promise of the ocean is sold as a panacea for the nation's poverty, even as the military resources required for this expansion are diverted from basic humanitarian needs and the reconstruction of war-torn provinces. This maritime expansion raises the ultimate investigative question. Is this the rebirth of a regional power or the final, violent death rattle of a collapsing central authority? The history of empires shows that when a regime can no longer maintain order at its core, it often seeks a high-stakes gamble on its periphery. The Somaliland deal is exactly this kind of move. By challenging the established borders of the Horn of Africa, the Ethiopian state has placed itself at the center of a potential regional conflagration. This is not the calculated growth of a stable nation. It is the frantic thrashing of a state that is running out of options. The resources required to build and defend a naval presence in contested waters are immense, and they are being committed at a time when the federal army is already overstretched and underfunded. The human consequence is a state that is willing to risk an international war to avoid dealing with its own internal failures. The maritime pivot may provide a temporary aesthetic of strength, but it cannot fix the fundamental decay of the social contract. If the gamble fails, it will not just be the end of a port deal, it will be the final fracture of an empire that attempted to conquer the waves because it could no longer hold the land. The investigative reality of modern Ethiopia is defined by a deliberate demographic strategy known as human unmixing. The presence of 3.3 million internal refugees is not an accidental byproduct of regional instability. It is the mechanical result of a state that has decided it can only survive by separating its people into ethnically pure enclaves. Why this is the structural hollowing out of a nation. By weaponizing displacement, the central administration has allowed regional militias to clear vast territories of inconvenient populations, creating a patchwork of homogeneous zones that are easier to police and control. For the millions living in makeshift camps on the edges of major cities, this is a permanent state of being. They are the human debris of a political project that prizes administrative uniformity over the lives of the citizens who lived on the land for generations. The investigation reveals that this unmixing is being used to settle historical scores and to redraw the map of the country in real time. This is not the movement of people escaping a natural disaster. Inuit is the methodical removal of the internal enemy from the centers of economic and agricultural production. The human cost is the total destruction of the multi-ethnic fabric that once defined the Ethiopian identity, replaced by a system where your safety is determined solely by the administrative boundary of your birth. The territory of Welkite stands as the most dangerous fault line in the fracturing empire. This fertile stretch of land, contested between the Tigray and Amhara regions, has become a site of permanent historical erasure. Our investigation into the records of the last 4 years reveals a systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing that has continued long after the global cameras were turned away. The land itself has been repurposed as a tool of state-sanctioned vengeance. Was by physically removing the Tigrayan population and replacing them with Amhara settlers, the local authorities are attempting to create a new reality on the ground that no future treaty can reverse. This is the physical rewriting of history through the destruction of graveyards, the renaming of towns, and the burning of ancestral records. The people of Welkate are caught in a cycle of generational trauma, where the soil is valued far more than the souls who tend it. This fault line ensures that even if a central peace is declared, the regional animosity remains a ticking clock. The state's refusal to provide a transparent, legal resolution to this land dispute is a calculated move to keep the regional powers in a state of permanent friction, allowing the center to maintain its position as the ultimate, albeit violent, arbiter of the nation's survival. The cessation of hostilities agreement signed in Pretoria was marketed to the world as a definitive end to the northern conflict, but it has proven to be nothing more than a paper peace. It was a deal designed to save the central administration from a total military collapse, not to address the root causes of the violence. The investigation reveals that the fundamental tensions, the questions of regional autonomy, the distribution of wealth, and the right to ethnic self-determination remain completely unresolved. The agreement allowed the state to pivot its military resources from the Tigray region toward the crushing of the Oromo and Amhara insurgencies, effectively turning a localized war into a national one. This is the reality of a state that uses peace treaties as tactical breathing room. So for the survivors of the Northern War, the paper peace has brought no justice, only a transition from active shelling to a state of perpetual low-level warfare and administrative siege. The failure of the international community to enforce the human rights provisions of the agreement has signaled to the government in Addis Ababa that it can continue its internal purges with total impunity. The Pretoria Agreement didn't stop the fire, it simply redistributed the heat to other parts of the heartland. The final verdict on the state of the nation reveals a fundamental disconnect between technological advancement and social disintegration. We have seen a government that can deploy 21st century drones to strike a village market in Marawi, but cannot provide basic security or bread to its capital. This is the soul of the empire being torn apart, and the administration has traded its moral authority for a digital panopticon, believing that total surveillance and mechanical violence can replace the need for a social contract. The investigation proves that the state's obsession with high-end skyscrapers and maritime expansion is a desperate effort to mask a deepening internal rot. The human consequence is a nation of survivors who no longer believe in the idea of a unified Ethiopia, but in the necessity of their own ethnic survival. The state's reliance on foreign technology to monitor and execute its own citizens is the ultimate proof of its failure. Every drone strike and every digital blackout further fractures the connection between the center and the periphery, leaving a vacuum where a national identity used to be. The ultimate truth is that Ethiopia is not a country being built. It is an empire being forcibly held together by the same 21st century drones that are tearing its soul apart.